Rivian hopes it can turn the corner on a profit soon as it accelerates production.
We remain confident that our cash equivalents, and short-term investments can fund our operations through 2025.
That story coming up on WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on the show, a journalist for Esquire magazine digs into Barton McNeil's efforts to get a new trial in his daughter's death.
There's a huge amount of very compelling evidence to suggest that he's innocent.
Plus, a look at some of the latest comings and goings on the Bloomington-Normal restaurant scene. Those stories follow a Bloomington-Normal news update just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington-Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patient Paul Brandt.
Honestly, I appreciate working with BNA. I would just say that I appreciate all the tough times with me, patience and persistence with me.
Paul's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Electric vehicle maker Rivian lost over $600 million in the fourth quarter of last year alone. Yet the company that has a production facility in Normal says it will bridge to a modest gross profit in the fourth quarter of this year. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker reports on how the company thinks it can do that.
Rivian cites several hopeful signs in its recent earnings call. Operating expenses rose just 2%, yet the company more than doubled production and delivery. There are now more than 70,000 Rivians on the road. That's a lot of progress and a lot of ground still to make up. Rivian is still losing $43,000 per vehicle it makes. Rivian Chief Financial Officer Claire McDonough says they will close a big part of the gap in one area alone.
The majority of this will be accomplished through material cost reductions planned as part of our Q2 2024 shutdown.
McDonough says Rivian will save money through simpler designs, lower material costs, and lower prices on supplies. In a lot of industries, supply costs have been going up. Why not for Rivian? CEO RJ Scaringe says they will pay less for parts because the industry as a whole has changed a lot since the last round of contracts in 2019 and 2020. Parts manufacturers now have more confidence in the viability of the EV sector and in Rivian in particular. Scaringe says Rivian is also buying more parts as it has ramped up production.
They now see us as a large customer, and they see what's coming with R2, and that gives us really meaningful negotiating leverage.
R2 is a new, less expensive vehicle Rivian will unveil next month. Scaringe says in many cases they've been able to renegotiate and remove the price premium for parts they had to pay as a new company. Where they couldn't do that, he says, they found new suppliers. And in one case, he says, raw materials costs are down sharply.
In the last year, specifically, lithium hydroxide, is down by about 4x from north of $80 a kilogram to just over $20 a kilogram today. So that has a very significant impact on our overall cost structure.
Lithium is used in EV batteries. Industry analysts have clucked a bit about the effect of the second quarter shutdown on Rivian's annual production. Rivian made more than 57,500 vehicles last year, double what they did in 2022. Analysts fret at the news Rivian projects it will make about the same number of vehicles this year. So how does that help get to break even this year? Rivian's answer is, even apart from the parts costs, the company will be better at making the EVs. Chief Financial Officer Claire McDonough says another 30% of the vehicle loss will go away through efficiency because of that second quarter pause.
As part of our planned shutdown, we are increasing the R1 line rate by approximately 30% to more efficiently produce vehicles.
It'll take fewer hours of labor to make a vehicle. The company has also announced a 10% staff cut in non-manufacturing jobs to lower costs. Rivian claims the final piece of the bridge, about 15% of it, is an uptick in non-vehicle revenue. After all, McDonough says there are those 70,000 Rivians on the road and growing.
We have the opportunity for increased revenue areas such as regulatory credits, accessories, service, remarketing, and software-enabled services.
Analysts wanted to know about the planned launch of the new R2 vehicle and whether the company could put off the line shutdown on the R1. CEO RJ Scaringe says nope, the tech is tied together and there is massive consolidation.
We reduced the number of computers by about 65%. And that network architecture and associated ECU topology is very closely related to what's in R2. And so it not only de-risks R2, but it's part of the development process and development sequence associated with the launch of that product.
Scaringe says part of Rivian's current cost structure came from launching production of two vehicles at once, a van and a pickup truck. There were also several variations of the truck. He says one of the lessons learned from that is the company will launch the R2, a single vehicle, with limited combinations. Rivian is optimistic, but they also burned through $4 billion last year. Chief Financial Officer Claire McDonough says they do expect to draw down $2.7 billion this year as they continue building out their charging, sales, and service networks.
We remain confident that our cash equivalents, and short-term investments can fund our operations through 2025.
But there's also that proposed new plant in Atlanta, Georgia. Rivian plans to spend $1.7 billion on infrastructure this year. So, like the movie, on its road to profitability, Rivian has to continue doing everything, everywhere, all at once. I'm Charlie Schlenker.
Coming up tomorrow on Sound Ideas, you'll hear about a veteran Bloomington police officer who tried to help two acquaintances who were implicated in a criminal investigation. The officer lost his job for that. Details in a report tomorrow on Sound Ideas.
Texas and President Biden's administration are fighting over access to a park on the southern border. Activists are questioning the park's name.
Because it should not be named after a coward and a traitor.
Shelby Park and the Confederacy, tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News. This is Steve Inskeep. Listen to Morning Edition weekdays from 4 to 9 a.m. on WGLT.
This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. I'm John Norton. A 1998 murder conviction against a Bloomington man is the subject of an investigative journalism piece in this month's Esquire magazine. In this conversation with WGLT's courts correspondent Edith Brady-Lunny, freelance journalist Matthew Bremner explains how he first got interested in the case of Barton McNeil. McNeil is seeking a new trial in the death of his 3-year-old daughter.
It's all about coincidence, I suppose. I happened to be covering a wrongful conviction case in Argentina. And in Argentina, they've just opened up effectively, just opened up, I think in the last 3 or 4 years. If branch is the right word, but like a kind of subset of the Innocence Project. So it's under the Innocence Project banner. It shares the same values, but obviously they're all local lawyers. And someone there, I can't remember exactly how it came up, but they kind of put me onto the case and said there's an interesting case that takes place in Illinois. You should just kind of have a look at it. And so I did. And then I sent Bart a physical letter, and I didn't hear back from him for a while. And then as you see in the piece, something happened in my own personal life, which made me kind of think about it again. And I can't remember if Bart had replied to me before, I don't want to make things up, or after what happened to me. But I think everything kind of came together in one go, and I decided, okay, I'm gonna pitch this around, and Esquire took it up, and I worked on it for a year, effectively.
Yeah, that was my next question, was how long did you work on that? So about a year. And how many interviews did you do?
I don't know, getting towards 20, I suppose, maybe over that. Obviously, people that appear in the piece, I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe they're about 10 to 12. But, a lot of things on background, for guidance and these kind of things. But yeah, I would say around 20, maybe a bit over that.
So after all that work, what was your impression of Bart McNeil? And did that impression change over the course of your those lengthy phone interviews I know you did, and the several in-person interviews you did when you traveled to the prison to talk to him.
I still speak to Bart quite intensely. There was a period in which, we were almost speaking twice, 3 times a week, as you said, over the phone. I met him twice in person. I think Bart is quite he's a particular character. He's eccentric in a way, but he's consistently so. And so I didn't really feel him change. I mean, obviously I got to know him better. I got to know his likes and dislikes, outside of the case. I got to know more about what his real feelings were, from an emotional point of view regarding what happened to him. But in terms of my general feeling about him, I felt that, it remained relatively constant throughout and still does to this day, even after publication. I mean, I actually think that Bart is probably reading this article as we speak, because I think someone sent in the mail a printed out version of the piece. So he hasn't read it yet. So it'll be interesting to see what his thoughts are. Although I think everyone else that around him that's read it hasn't had too many complaints. So I think that is a decent sign, at least.
As a reporter myself, who has covered Bart's case for more than a decade, I see a number of things that this case has in common with other innocence cases that move through the court system. And one thing that stands out to me in this case is the fact that he and his lawyers have identified the person they believe is responsible for Christina's death. And of course, that person is his former girlfriend, Masuk Nowlin. Did that stand out to you as well when you were considering taking that deep dive that you did into this case?
Looking at it from a journalistic point of view, a lot of the kind of protagonist, antagonist, cameo characters, if you want to put it in those terms, were all kind of there. Whether I could get to them or not, whether they would speak to me or not, is a different thing. But yeah, I think it made it more compelling because there was someone to go after, someone to ask questions of, and in the end I did get to speak to Masuk, and she had her own kind of version of events. But yeah, certainly I think it made the story more complete. It made Bart's case more compelling, and it made it more. It made it easier in a way to investigate because there were less unknowns. I mean, there are a lot of unknowns in this case, but there was at least someone that I could go to for answers, even if those answers turned out to be somewhat evasive in the end.
What was your impression of Masuk Nowlin? I know that you were able to have a conversation with her as well.
Yeah, so that was very difficult. I think, back when we were speaking, I hadn't been able to speak to her yet, and I, sent her various letters. I sent her 5 or 6 emails through the prison kind of email service. And she didn't reply to any of them. And then about a month and a half before we were due to close the article, pinged up in my inbox, Masuk Nowlin, and she was somewhat kind of, I don't think aggressive is the right word, but somewhat kind of cautious, let's say, kind of aggressively cautious. We had a bit of a back and forth. Unfortunately, with her email system, there was a big delay, so it wasn't as efficient as Bart's. So it was somewhat protracted. She spoke to me for about an hour and a half, over 90 minutes. The first 25 minutes of the phone call were how she didn't really want to speak to me and how she might hang up if I asked her the wrong questions. But anyway, after that was overcome, I was able to put all of the allegations that exist out there, and that Bart had and that other people have, and she answered them in her own way.
The title of your piece ends with a question mark, who killed baby Christina? So McNeil recently lost, as you know, his bid for a new trial in McLean County Court, so he's headed now to the appellate level. Do you feel that your story and the information that you put together through your research and your interviews answered the question of who killed Christina?
Oh, wow. Big question. I think as a reporter, and you know this too, the best that we can hope to do is to really consider the evidence at hand, try our best to find new evidence, whether that's in the form of, physical evidence, or tracking down people, and putting that together in a way which allows, a bit like in a court of law, the readers or the jury to kind of make their own verdict or their own judgment on whether, Barton is innocent or guilty. I mean, I will say that I think that in Barton's case, there's a huge amount of very compelling evidence to suggest that he's innocent. Too much to be discounted, I think. And so, I hope that, without getting too kind of definitive on what I think or feel, I hope that the piece in some way can contribute to someone, in the authority thinking, okay, we need to look at this case again, we need to give another shot, because I think at the very least it deserves that, given all of the inconsistencies and strange things that are going on inside this case.
That was freelance journalist Matthew Bremner speaking with WGLT correspondent Edith Brady-Lunny. Stories and conversations around Bloomington-Normal and McLean County. This is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. A rebounding restaurant scene saw 34 openings in the Bloomington-Normal area last year, with 14 open or set to open thus far in 2024. That's according to retired McLean County Food Inspector Larry Carius, who keeps tabs on the regional restaurant scene. Carius recently stopped by WGLT studios to debrief Lauren Warnicki on industry news. Carius captures his conversations with restaurant owners in a Facebook blog called Bloomington-Normal Restaurant Scene. It's a passion that began nearly 15 years ago when his wife Kay noticed how many hours he was logging in a recliner. Now his retirement hobby has more than 40,000 followers and is one of the most successful Facebook pages in town. And he says he's as surprised about that as you are.
I'm not a good writer, and really the major interest I have in the restaurants is the ones that open, the ones that close, maybe do a major remodeling, but I'm most interested in the people who run restaurants. I find them absolutely fascinating. You have to be a different type of person to be a successful restaurant owner. And I mean that in a positive way.
We've had recent announcements of 2 restaurants closing in downtown Bloomington, Under the Ground and Zeta. What can you tell us about their reasons for closing?
All I know is what I read on Facebook. I've not talked with Joel at Zeta Coffee. I've not talked with Cecil at Under the Ground. From what I understand, Joel said on Facebook he wants to concentrate on his restaurant out in Downs, Illinois, which is a freestanding building, which is an old, nice building. Under the Ground, I read on Facebook, the same as what you read on Facebook. I think they've kind of struggled there since they've opened. I know nothing more than that.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you about that location in particular. There have been, a lot of restaurants that have come and go from that location. Certainly One Flingers has been very successful in a new location. And I know you don't like to speculate about heebie-jeebies at any particular location, but do you think that has anything to do with it?
I rarely, and I say rarely, blame a location for a restaurant's demise, because as soon as I blame the location for a restaurant's demise, another restaurant might open next year, which is wildly successful. A good local restaurant that serves food, they can survive in most locations.
I'd love to talk also about a couple of restaurants who were temporarily closed. Luca Grill being perhaps one of the more notable restaurants, 87 years of operation. They're now newly reopened. What happened there?
They closed for 10 days. They had a walk-in cooler in the basement. It could have been the original walk-in cooler. It still worked okay, but as John, the owner, said, it was just time for a new one. And the way it was built in the basement and everything, they had to close because they had to tear it out. They got their saws all in there and they tore it out, and then they had to rebuild a new one. And then also while they were doing that they put in a new glycol beer cooling unit, which I don't really understand, but but he said was very expensive. So they were closed for 10 days to replace the walk-in cooler and to put in a new glycol unit.
Now, I believe the Chick-fil-A on Veterans Parkway has also been closed for a little bit. There are other places to get your chicken fix around town, but of course this is a tragic development that Chick-fil-A is temporarily closed. So what's going on there?
I stopped and talked to the general manager, to the owner, and I don't fully understand what they're doing there. On the pickup side, they are expanding it. That on the inside, they're going to be building or putting in a new crew room, that they're carving it out of the dining room, but that the playground or the play area is going to be going.
And is there anything new on the horizon that we should look for to be opening in the next couple of months?
We have 3 restaurants that are planning on opening in the next month or so. I stopped by at Reverie this morning. Reverie is the former Ozark House, and they open up Monday. And then we have Jets Pizza that's in the Eastland Commons Shopping Center. This is between Kobe and Hot Walk. Are you familiar with Jets Pizza?
I am not.
I wasn't either. It's a Detroit-style pizza, and it's famous for its 8-corner pizzas.
So Pizza Paya might have a little bit of competition on their hands for the Detroit style, huh?
And you're not going to ask me about eight corners pizza?
Is it an octagon?
When I talk to people, you're the first one who did not ask me. When Jets started, their first pizza pan, they were used from one of the automobile manufacturers up there. Guy who started took them home, cleaned them up. They were a special heavy-duty pan. When you made the pizza in these pans, it formed special 4 corners. They were very thick and very crispy. So when the pizza started to become popular, people were fighting over the corners. So now when you get a large pizza, it's not one large pizza, it's 2 smaller pizzas that are put together.
Gotcha.
And they're eight
So more people
pizza.
get an end piece.
I
gotcha.
That's more than what you ever wanted to know.
My colleagues and I have somewhat of a investigative report going on the various cheese ball varieties that are all over Bloomington-Normal establishments. Where do you go to get your cheese balls?
I don't go anywhere to get cheese balls. That's the best thing I can answer on that. So
You're not a cheese ball guy?
Well, if somebody has a cheese ball, of course I will enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I have never purchased a cheese ball in my life.
Also new on the scene are Social Taco, a concept restaurant placing all sorts of global delights on a tortilla. Social Taco is now open in the shops at College Hills, replacing Flat Top Grill. And speaking of tortillas, both Moe's Southwest Grill locations have reopened following remodeling in Bloomington and Normal, and Tequila's Mexican restaurant is now also open in Hayworth. WGLT's Lauren Warnicki spoke with Twin City restaurant watcher Larry Carius. And that is Sound Ideas today. WGLT's news magazine is made possible in part by Bloomington-Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help came from WGLT's Charlie Schlenker and Lauren Warnicki. Also, courts correspondent Edith Brady-Lunny. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, Bloomington-Normal's public media and part of the NPR network.